Oh my gosh, we're live. Joe, Lara, you can tell I'm happy to see you. I'm happy to talk to you. You're one of my favorite people, period, but also to mess around and do stuff with in the world. And as I was thinking about getting ready to have a conversation with you, I'm a Dodgers fan. I'm a Tiger Woods aficionado. I was a part of the Little League for a while, so I've had associations with other groups of people that have meant something to me, like Tiger fans. How deep does it go? Your love and affection for him as a golfer. Dodgers fans, like Dodger Nation. But I have never worn a uniform. I worked at Togo's. I was a sandwich maker when I was 16. That's the only time I ever wore a uniform. But the question I want to ask for you, having had a long career in the Navy, what did wearing the uniform do for you? What was military service? What did it not what did you do, but what did it do for you?
So many lessons. I mean, and luckily because I worked with you for several years now, I've developed a really good ability to reflect, which I don't think I did enough. I think most of us don't reflect
Right.
enough,
Right.
honestly. And so you kind of coached me in the process of how to reflect, right? And it's in stories, it's in storytelling. And so, Joe, think of a time when you felt this way or whatever. And in that process, I realized, and I can now say what I've learned is how to really love and care for people. And 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 it's so funny because that word love usually don't associate to the military.
No.
I mean, you just don't. You you don't associate that word love to your coworkers, your peers. You save that for your family. You save that for friends. Like you, right? Um, but it's interesting, and I remember going through the exercise of writing and journaling, where I thought of an idea and maybe something I want to write, and I end up putting it on LinkedIn just to kind of test the waters in LinkedIn and what's it like to post something. And I was writing about my experience in the military and trying to figure out what is it that connects us to each other, that makes us serve at a higher level where we would literally risk our lives for one another.
Yeah.
What else do you call that? And the word that I came up with is love. And what's funny is I've shared that same concept or idea or word with other veterans, and they're like, yeah, you know, we don't wear it on our sleeve. We don't say, hey, I love you, man. I love you. You know, that's not what we do.
It's not affectionate in that way.
You just do stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But when you think of some really stressful times and experiences that a lot of us have encountered in just because of the nature of the work, the environment, there are times where you just develop a trust and an appreciation for one another, where some of, I mean, I've lost some people that meant something to me and still do. And I know that, you know, if they would have probably done it again. And it's weird because, you know, you don't talk about it. You just react, you just respond. And you're there for the person to your left and right. And it's just, that is helped me appreciate people, understand others and service. And I mean, so many lessons, man, but that's what really sticks out for me.
You know, we in the USCO world talk about these three big concepts, pillars of a meaningful life. There's identity. You have to really know who you are, what matters to you, what defines you, what you believe in. That's identity. There's purpose, which is why are you here, a meaningful contribution to make, how you're serving others. And then there's belonging, which is the kind of stuff you're talking about. It's deeper relationships. It's working through conflict with others. It's the deep stuff. And in other communities, they don't necessarily call it identity, purpose, and belonging. They would say faith, hope, and love. And trying to find a life that's fulfilling or meaningful without one of those key components, without something big to believe in, without a reason to get up the next day, anybody needing you, without people that you could depend on who really know who you are. That's a, you know, I can't imagine that. That's where you get depression. That's where you get loneliness, meaninglessness. That's those three concepts to me became crystal clear by working with you and other folks transitioning out of the military. I've watched and listened. I remember talking to a guy, and he was talking about that same concept. He wasn't using the word love like you, but he said, there's a gentleman in this room who stepped in front of a bullet for me. And I was like,
right.
I mean, the idea of my friends having my back, I think they do, but I'm not sure if they do in that kind of way.
Right.
So when you think about the experiences that you've had, the love that you've experienced, and then moving out of that community, transitioning away from that, maybe you can just talk a little bit about what the losses you felt as you went through transition.
That's what it felt like. What was the loss? I mean, that word loss, you can kind of let that sink in a little bit and what that means for you. A lot of us, when we're getting ready to transition out career-wise, think about other things. We don't dwell on that. It's sort of this anxiety that we sense, but we suppress it, and we just feel, you know what? It's a phase. I'll get over it. I'll move on with my life. That's far out. I'll eventually get there and I'll figure it out. What I really need to focus on is what's the job title, what's the salary, and those external things and needs. Rightly so, right?
Right.
I think that's what drives most of us, is those needs. But then there's a sort of like a reality period, and it's just a change cycle, right? Where it's like maybe it's a little bit of denial, like, man, I can't believe my career is ending. I can't believe this is ending, and you start really listening and honing in on the feelings you're feeling inside, which you try to suppress, but they keep coming up and bubbling up, where you feel that sense of loss of community, loss of brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever you want to call it, family. And it's I remember specifically going through the airport, and this is after I had left the military with my wife. We were traveling across the country, and we got laid over at a layover at Dallas, and went to the USO. You see the USOs everywhere, all over the country at airports. It's a great organization that you can always guarantee to get a really cheap free bologna sandwich inside the USO, but it's available for veterans and military members. And it's open, and it's ran by volunteers. And so we walked in, and I remember looking, and immediately when I walked in, there's a wall, and it was full of Velcro name tags. So in the military, they're very familiar with our names on our uniforms, and you can kind of pull them off with Velcro, some of our uniforms. And obviously over the years, and visitors were putting their name tags on this wall. And so it's just filled from the floor all the way to the ceiling. There's just a bunch of names, Smith, Rodriguez, name the name. It was probably there on the wall. And that hit a certain way. I'm like, wow, okay. Then I walked around the corner, and I look, and on the floor were a bunch of veterans sleeping on the floor, on the couches, everywhere, just kind of all huddled up. And I'm like, it wouldn't surprise me if some of these people don't even know each other. And like, where else in the airport does this kind of environment exist? Right. Like in the city, where does it exist? Like, there's just like an understanding that we have of each other, and it's community. It's something that we know, we've felt, we've experienced, and there's a connection now. And those are the moments and little stories that'll hit me where I realize, wow, we had something special. We have something special. Yeah. And I'm finding it now, and where I'm at in my new career, where I'm with a regular company business, right? And I'm finding pockets of veterans, and we have this little inside conversation and talk and little nods. I mean, it's all virtual now, but in a real life moment, we could say, "Yeah, I got you. I understand you. We get it, right?" And I wouldn't say it's a click. I think it's just an understanding. It's I don't know how else to explain it, but there is a community aspect to it for sure, and that's where you really get the sense of, man, can I find this outside of the military? Right. I think a lot of veterans get stuck and frustrated because they don't find it. They try. They maybe don't pay attention to those inner feelings. Yeah. They launch themselves out into a new career, and then they're swimming in an ocean that they're not familiar with, and they're not familiar. And so the reaction is to retract or depression, and then obviously for some even worse, right? It's pretty awful. That community is something that I think a lot of us need to remember and reflect on, but also realize, how do I build it moving forward? How do I build new communities, new groups to belong to? It's super important.
There's kind of an implicit anxiety I think any human can relate to when you realize you can't control things, you can't control outcomes. And in many cases, you can get a job, but you can't control if that job's going to be with good people. You can't control if that job's going to be personally fulfilling. You can't control if that job's going to be there You can't control anybody. You can't control relationships. And when I think about the veteran transition, the idea that what you mentioned, loss, I'm losing these things that are actually core to our human desires, core to human nature, an identity, purpose, even if it's cooking on a ship. I don't say even if it's the direct purpose is not aligned to how we normally think of as like fighting the bad guys, if that makes sense. Logistics, supplies, back end, technology, and then certainly the belonging part that you're mentioning. That's really acute. But a lot of the world I spend is with students, with kids, with young people who haven't had those experiences yet, per se, and they also share the same anxiety. Will life work out okay? Will I find people that really accept me and love me? Will I find a purpose that's worth living for? Will I have something that really matters in my life? Like, and the answer, I think, from parents and adults who work with kids is, we hope so. I hope so for you. And typically, I think the answer for most is, don't worry about that sort of thing. Just put your head down and it'll all work out somewhere down the road, which is a pretty similar message I think that you all get in veteran transition. Don't worry about it. It'll all just work out. What do you think about that idea?
So that article that I wrote on LinkedIn, I got some comments because it was live. It was out there. It was posted. And an individual who had great intentions responded with, you know what? While we honor who you are and in the group of people that you represent, the veterans, everybody goes through career transitions. Everybody goes through it. So, yes, I understand you, but kind of get on with it. Like it's just let things happen. Just do what you need to do. And I understand what they're saying, but I didn't obviously agree with it. Like, you know what? I would say that, transition is not unique, but our transition is.
Yeah.
So transitions occur all the time. Got it. I agree.
Right.
But ours is very unique because we're coming from a close-knit culture and now losing that culture, being immersed into an area that's the unknown, like you described. And that unknown, if we don't choose wisely, just like that young high school student is trying to figure out the college, the university, what to study, what career after that. They're trying to plan their life and they're 16, 17, 18. My goodness, what kind of pressure?
Yeah. Seriously.
Hey, figure it out now.
Yeah.
And you're basically planning your trajectory for the next 40 years. Yeah. Like, what?
Don't blow it.
That wait, right? Don't blow it. You have a veteran that's been in this sort of time capsule, and you and I have talked about this, where it's, hey, I found my culture. I did a career of 24 years. I'm now 40 something or 30 something, and I'm 18 years old again, starting over. What do I want to be? What do I want to do? Don't choose incorrectly. Don't screw this up, Joe. Right?
Totally.
It's so interesting, the correlation there.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is too, we don't want to settle. No, like you don't talk to a young person saying, "Hey, do you want to be mediocre?"
Totally, yeah.
or any veteron for that matter. It don't matter what job you did in the military. Like, hey, do you want to be mediocre?
Like middle management would be great for you.
Kind of what because that's what everybody's doing. Right? Everybody's just kind of just doing stuff. So just figure it out.
Yeah.
No, I want to strive for something more, and it doesn't always mean salary, title, those things. It means belonging.
Yeah.
Clarity, purpose, all of that. Yeah.
It's so disorienting the way you're describing that. When you're under pressure to make these big decisions, you don't know if they're going to work out. It's not only disorienting, it's hard to see clearly. You actually feel under threat, and from a kind of neuroscience level, when we feel under threat, what goes out the window is our ability to think clearly, make cognitive, clear, wise choices. We're in survival mode. What have you, and so and this kind of missing link for folks who don't know you, post-military, in your military transition, you got to support and serve other folks coming out of the military through transition. So maybe talk about your top 2 or 3 best practices. What do you do when you're disoriented in transition?
Biggest thing I could stress is, don't do it alone. Don't think you can do it on your own. It could be as simple as company corporate research, where the knee-jerk reaction is, Google knows everything. There's job opportunities. Let me just Google and the answers will appear. Well, we've seen what happens when you have an itch and you look it up on WebMD, how your mind can just go crazy.
Yeah.
And just like lose it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have this rare disease now. Like, no, calm down. Go talk to somebody, i.e. a doctor, or I'm interested in a career. Talk to the person who's doing that career. Imagine that if we had to go out of our shell, but there's risk with that, right? Risk of sounding dumb. I'm out of my element. How do I even talk to people? I know how to talk to military. I don't know how to talk to this type of people.
Yeah.
Same thing youth go through. Well, I'm just a kid. Why would an adult want to listen to me? Like we play these things to ourselves. We play the story out as if it's true.
Yep.
And we start feeding ourselves. And then before you know it, we're not moving anything. And we're staying in our comfort zone behind the Google machine, which knows all the answers. I was talking to a veteran who was so sure of himself that he wanted to go into human resources. Didn't have a background in it. Did his research online. And said, there's a certification called SHRM, SHRM or whatever. Everybody's getting it, and I found the organization. I found how much it costs to get it, and then these are the EDUs and everything I need to get year after year to get certified and get into that world. And that's what I think I need to do. I'm like, interesting. How many human resource folks did you talk to that recommended that? None. None. I'm like, interesting. Okay, so let me play this for you in a different way. Say I come across an individual who wants to be a Navy SEAL. They're 18 and you find out and they're like, yeah, I went online and I saw this YouTube video of people running and swimming and getting ready for the training. And I've done all the research and I'm doing it all. Yeah. I'm swimming and I'm running and I'm good to go. I'm ready. You'd probably laugh and say, well, that I know some people and maybe I could help you and coach you and kind of get you. He just started he knew where I was going with it, obviously, right? When I started going down that path, he's like, okay, you made your point, Joe. I'll go talk to people. It's a long way to say talk to people. Yeah. Like,
right. Totally.
Get connected. Don't do it alone. If you think you're going to stumble into an opportunity on your own, the chances are just so against you.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
You need to get connected to people. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about journaling. What do you mean by that?
So journaling, I think it's one of those things where people automatically write it off as, oh, for sure I journal, or no way could I journal. Yeah. You're like in either camp. Like, I'm a Dodger fan. I hate the Dodgers or Lakers, whatever. Pick your team. And then it's just one of those exercises where when it's introduced to you, you realize the value in it. I think most people realize the value in it. And the reason why I argue that most people would is because I've done this experiment many times in my prior career, helping veterans do career transition, where we introduce journaling, most for the first time. I think what helps is if it's guided.
Yeah.
Non-guided is okay too, a blank sheet of paper.
Sure.
It's helpful to kind of just, I feel an emotion, let me start writing what that emotion is.
Yeah.
That some people can do that. I found with those that have no experience or even comfort in listening to their emotions can benefit from guided journaling. And guided journaling could be just simple prompts.
Right.
Tell me a time when you had a sense of flow, where you felt alive,
right.
And it was in your work, and it involved other people. And then, and you keep putting these little ands to it. And now an individual can think of a time and you start writing.
Yep.
And then it leads to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Yep.
And with guided journaling, I've witnessed this. What's funny is I used to do this experiment where I would create time and space, 20 minutes of journaling for these veterans first time. And I could see the awkward shifts in the chair as they start putting the pen to paper. Some just staring at the ceiling. Like, what do I write? Like, all the answers are on the ceiling. Like, oh my gosh, what?
Yep.
It's just so funny to watch and observe. But I also know that they're struggling, which is good. And I even prompt it with, hey, get used to being uncomfortable. This is an uncomfortable process. I already addressed the uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
Get used to it. At the end of the 20 minutes, I asked them, hey, don't tell me what you wrote. That's personal. What was it like for you to journal? And most of the answers started out positive. I thought it was interesting to journal and have prompts. If it wasn't for those prompts, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Right.
Awesome. So I've heard that numerous times.
Yeah.
I mean, and all the heads nodding. Oh yes, definitely keep that in. Good. What else?
Yeah.
How it was hard to start writing, but as they started writing more, the answers became more real, more authentic, more vulnerable. The further they did it. If it was just initial answers no. The more they journaled, the more they were forced to kind of dive in, the more real it got. Inevitably, if somebody didn't raise their hand to say it sucked, I would say, who thought it sucked, the exercise of journaling? And of course, there were a few hands. Yeah. But they themselves argued right back in favor for it, saying, I didn't like it because it was too real.
Yeah.
I'm not used to addressing or even looking at those feelings. Right. Speaking about them internally, like the internal monologue, we kind of quiet it down and we bypass it. Well, let's put words to your inner monologue. Yeah. And now stare at it. And they would say, these words are now staring me in the face. Huh. I'm like, is this beneficial? Do you see the benefit? And they're the ones saying that they need this after I've already put them through this weird exercise of journaling. And it was pretty remarkable to see. So I would argue that most people don't realize the value in it until they've been through the exercise of journaling.
I think to recap what you're saying, when you're not sure where to go, what to do, maybe when you're not sure who you are, there's some simple things to do. Think, talk, and listen. And there's something about thinking about the right questions, thinking about the right conversations, the questions. And that's getting back to really the context of what we're doing here with U School, with this podcast, with content and curriculum. People ask me all the time, what is U School? It's an abstract name. U School, it's a school you go to figure yourself out and figure out who you are, all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's it. But in a nutshell, what is U School? It's a series of questions. It's questions that we've kind of painstakingly paid attention to figure out what are the right and more productive and helpful questions. That if you answer these questions, you will get clearer about the big three things: your identity and your purpose and how to have healthy relationships. These questions are so important, and they're questions that aren't given in school necessarily. They're not given on like an intake form as you enlist in the military. They're not given to you as you walk your way out of the military. There may be questions you get at a campfire or a retreat if you're a part of a community that does that, but maybe a good mentor will ask you these questions. Or maybe a lot of times I think people have these questions in the back of their minds, but it gets distorted on the way in. So the question of who are you gets distorted to you're nothing, or you don't have what it takes, or if you could have a few more things, a few more possessions, a few more accolades, then you'll be something or someone. That gets distorted by ourselves, to your point. Lastly, I guess I'm just curious from your perspective, raising kids who are several years ahead of my own children, what have you learned about being a dad to teenagers and these questions? I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the questions are so important. And I was thinking back to that first question, like, who are you? I think for the veteran, they would say, well, I'm a veteran. Yeah. I'm a pay grade. I'm a rank. I'm a job.
Right.
A lot of adults do that. And because that's the easy thing. It's in the front. It's in the surface. But who are you inside when you take off the uniform? And those questions are super important. And so to go back to raising two boys to now young men, it's asking those questions and being intentional as a parent, but also be willing to have a sense of humility as the parent, as the authority figure.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying ask these questions and let your kids run all over you. No, they're still my responsibility, and I'm the father figure, and I will always be that. But to sort of be vulnerable in front of them, saying, "Hey, son, is there anything that you do, or is there any behavior that I portray in the house around you or in the home that you feel that you want me to do more? Like you want me to be more insightful to how you're progressing in school, or what would you like me to do more of?" And be ready for the response. Just let them talk freely, and then also say follow-up question, which is a hard one. What do you want me to do less of? As your father, what do you not need me to do? And in that, even just thinking about those questions, it makes me reflect on my behavior as a dad and think, am I too oppressive, or am I too forceful in my responses? Do I let them speak? it makes me question myself before I even ask that question.
Huh.
So, but again, my thoughts are different from their feeling and how they view life and how they've lived in the house. And so I have to be ready to let them speak freely and make them feel safe that their answer is okay. And I'm not going to be mad at them no matter what they say. I can't just come up with those questions like that. I have to have a relationship with my kids where they can be honest and I can feel that there's honest conversation.
Yep.
So yes, conversations are important. And sometimes it's the actions that you have to build and the trust you have to build, which enables you to ask those questions. Right. I guarantee you, when I was in my military career, heavy on deployments, not home very often, I couldn't have asked those questions then. It wasn't until I came back home and intentionally spent more time with them, intentionally quieted my own voice to let them speak up, hear them, where they could build the trust in me so I can now ask these questions and get honest answers. I think that's something that parents find frustrating is, hey, how was your day in school? It was okay. Good. And it just ends there. Fun, good, sucked. Okay, well, it sucked. Okay, tell me more. At least that's something, right? But most kids don't even do that. I think the parents maybe need to work on, what are you doing to be able to ask the good questions? There might be, I had to do work to get there. It's so interesting. But those questions, when you're able to get them, oh man, it's so good. I could go on and on about those conversations, but just to get there took a process.
Well, I think what I've watched in your life, which has now become kind of gospel to the youth school world, is if you're a parent raising kids and you want and hope for them to be able to answer those questions for themselves, and the anxiety you feel is, what do I do? How do I get them to do that? The first and foremost thing to do, which is what you've done, was answer them yourself first. And somehow that percolated. Somehow that led to a shift in the relationship that you had with them. So that's not always a great answer, though. I at least when I've given that kind of response to parents, what do I do for my kid? And my answer is, you, you first. That hasn't been like, oh, but that's the answer I was looking for. It's usually like, what class can I give them? What book can I read? And it's a slower.
Give me the prescription so I can.
Right. This is a slow growth stuff. But thanks for modeling that. For me as a dad, I get to watch you and your boys and get to see what that's like, because frankly, I'm not really sure what that looks like to have a real close relationship and a relationship where you work on it, father to son, father to kid. And it's always a reminder when I think about you and I'm around you, it's about me first. And before I get to working out my issues on my kids, I got to work on me first. So thank you for that. Thanks for friendship. And for those of you watching, you might be curious, what are those questions? Well, a really simple thing you can do, and it's in the show notes, will be to download the questions. And it's a great starting place just to start processing through, to what degree can I answer some of these or all of these? So it's either yes or no, I have an answer. And then there's a degree for each one of those questions. How confident, how clear, how authentic is that answer in your life? So grab that and get to work, pen and paper and a friend. It's thinking, it's talking, and it's listening. That's what this whole work is all about. So we'll be back next time with another episode of the Youth School Podcast.